Talk today about unmasking respect and commanding genuine respect as a woman leader. Now, if you are, this is came up in my masterclass yesterday in terms of, well, what do we define respect as? So I want to take you through today what respect is, what give you a fresh perspective on it, as well as the unique challenges that women face when it comes to respect and respect in the workplace, as well as their leadership directness. So, what I'm going to dig into this by giving you some specific mistakes, as well as the common ways that women are disrespected, and also ways in terms of determining whether or not you are being respected. Okay, so certainly a number of these are more unique to women versus men. But I don't want to completely exclude that it can't happen to men as well in their work environments. All right, so let's dive into this today. So the first one, when we're looking at commanding respect as a woman leader, what I have often seen is that there is this tendency to emulate those traditional masculine leadership styles. So that might be much more of an authoritarian, thinking that you need to very much be being the boss that directs people in what they're doing and need to be doing. So there's no room for discussion. It's, they say, well, jump, and you ask how high. Now, I know this is a fairly more on to the extreme side of it, but oftentimes when we're talking about traditional masculine leadership styles, one of those biggest issues that I find, especially for women that are wanting to advance in their careers, is that they're very uncomfortable with taking on that type of masculine leadership style. So one of the first mistakes I see a lot of women leaders making as they're growing up in their career, or advancing, I should say, in their career, is that perspective of emulating those masculine leadership styles. The second, you're overcompensating with assertiveness. Now, if you were at yesterday's masterclass, I talked about assertive communication and that it is necessary. Also, being direct is necessary. If you're direct, you're much kinder than trying to circumvent or beat around the bush, as the saying goes, because you're wanting to spare someone's feelings. However, there is that line, right? And one of the biggest hesitations that women have around being more assertive is because they don't want that immediate association. Well, you're being a bitch. So what happens when we overcompensate with assertiveness is that you just step in too strongly. So what could that possibly look like? So for example, you are simply almost barking out orders and not looking to be collaborative, for example. So you're just saying, I need this done, get this done by tomorrow. So if you have seen, for example, The Devil Wears Prada. I know this was a movie quite a few years ago with Meryl Streep. Now, the way that she acts and the way that she comes across is extremely assertive. And that does not really foster great respect within your teams either. So other specific mistakes I see, this will be the last three, is you're not setting or maintaining clear boundaries around your work or your expectations. And just as a side note, boundaries is also communicating to others how they can respect you. So if you're not clear on your boundaries, then everyone else is going to make those boundaries work for them, not in your best interest. The fourth one is diminishing your accomplishments or not taking credit for your work. Now, this is something I've seen so often. Women will step up and they will share accomplishments, and they'll do it in, well, the team accomplished this. Well, or it's, I got lucky and this happened. No. There's no luck. And if your team accomplished something, that's fantastic. Celebrate that. And what was the specific added value or contribution that you made that you can also highlight in that moment in time? So don't diminish or dismiss your accomplishments and achievements, but you want to start celebrating those loud and proud. And the fifth one is you stay silent in situations where you should be speaking up and voicing your thoughts. So if you're finding yourself in a meeting, it's like, oh my goodness, This strategy is really not what we should be pursuing. And what happens, you end up going, well, no one's going to listen to me anyways, or I don't know how to formulate this in a valuable way, or maybe I've seen this wrong. So, too often, what I have found with the women that I've worked with is they are doubting their own abilities and their own knowledge and wisdom, and then stay silent rather than speaking up and sharing their thoughts, observations, opinions, or ideas. So, what happens when you're making these mistakes, of course, is that you're going to end up feeling overlooked, unheard, and underappreciated. Now, when we're talking specifically about respect, and please feel free to drop any comments below if you've got questions. I'm not sure if we're working here. There we go. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or slide into my DMs and ask me your questions there. So when we're talking about respect, what does respect look like? Because this is a really can you might be asking yourself, well, I don't know if I'm respected or not respected. How do I tell? Now, here's 5 common ways that women leaders are disrespected. One, they're being spoken over or interrupted during meetings. They have their decisions or ideas second guessed. Now, not only by their superiors, but also by their own team members or colleagues. They're not being acknowledged or given credit for their contributions or their successes. Now, I know we've all had that experience where you're in a meeting, you contribute an idea, you come up with a strategy, and it seems to be ignored until one of your male colleagues steps up and mentions it. And all of a sudden, it's the most fantastic idea in the world, right? That is a way that women are, and leaders especially, are being disrespected. You're also facing gendered criticism or feedback that focuses on your personal attributes rather than your professional ability. And lastly, you're expected to be taking on the office housework or the more nurturing role. So consider you're the one that's being asked to take notes at a meeting, or you might be asked, hey, could you arrange for the coffee and the snacks for this meeting? Or maybe you're the one that is expected to take on the role of ensuring that everyone is feeling all right, taking the temperature of the team, making sure that birthdays or anniversaries, etc., aren't forgotten. Now, I don't want to point this out that this is only a female experience. However, more often than not, women are being asked to take on these actions, or are ways in which women are more often disrespected than men are. So, let's talk about 5 ways that it would look like if you are being respected as a leader. Because again, this conversation came up yesterday during my masterclass. If you want the replay, then DM me replay below, or comment below where replay, and I'll make sure I get you that replay so you can watch that as well. But here's some ways that you can tell whether or not you're being respected as a leader. 1, your team is actively seeking out your guidance or advice on various matters. So consider, for example, Steve Jobs. When he returned to Apple, I always get those companies mixed up, but when he returned to Apple, he was often sought out by the different team members in order to get their advice on various matters or on new products development because of his innovative ideas. A second way can be that the team trusts your decision and is willing to follow your lead. So again, they're not second guessing, but they trust that you are making the best decision, and that they then are looking at, well, how do I, now that you've taken that decision, how can I implement this and how can I support that? What's my role within that decision? Now, you have the third is that your colleagues and subordinates speak highly of you when you're not there. So none of that backstabbing or at the coffee machine as soon as they walk out of the meeting. I'm like, oh my God, Kim is just such a difficult person to work for. I can't believe that she's made this decision. It's absolutely the stupidest decision that you could think of. Now, of course, I'm laying it on a little thick here, but you get the idea, right? Your colleagues aren't going behind your back, or your team members or your leaders behind your back having a conversation about that is negative about you. So if you want to know if you are respected, then pull, how do I always say that? Ask around about what is being said of you when you're not there. Your ideas and suggestions are being given serious consideration and likely implemented. You're also being sought out to participate in crucial decision-making processes. So, for example, I have got to remember her name, Carly Fioriani. Sorry, I really slaughtered that name. But she was Carly Fiorina was the CEO of Hewlett Packard. But what she ended up having is a lot of her ideas were ignored by the board, and it led to a lot of tension and eventual resignation. But she was also being excluded from key decisions with regards to the company by the board as well. So this is a sign that she was not being respected. All right. So now that we have got a brief perspective on what does respect look like versus how respect does not look like, what can you then go and do about that? So in the first step, I want you to understand that respect isn't about being dominant. It's about being authentic, building trust, and having a mutual understanding. Now, one of those ways that I really encourage all the women that I work with to do is to become more direct and concise in their communication, in not allowing as much ambiguity or over explaining themselves, because often over explanation is just a way of covering up insecurities. When you are much more concise and direct in your communication, it's very clear as to your expectations, and then it becomes also much more clear whether someone is going to follow you, or they are going to have a difficulty or resistance to that. Now, resistance again is not necessarily bad. So I want to be clear here. When we're talking about respect, respect does not mean that everyone just simply agrees with you. There should be room for a healthy discussion. That discussion takes place on a professional playing field. So in other words, when you disagree with someone, you disagree on professional grounds. That doesn't mean that you're pulling in personal attributes that then will make that discussion much more personal, of like, well, you don't understand because you're a woman. Now, again, supercharged comment there. That's not necessarily what you might be hearing. But what I want you to realize is that when we're talking about respect, it's not just about being very clear, but it's also making sure that you understand that directness is not bad, and that respect doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with you. You can have a healthy conversation and discussion, and then come out, in the best case scenario, into a better outcome or better decision afterwards, and build up your team's respect because you have taken the time to listen, and they have taken the time to listen to you, and you've worked out a solution in that way. So I just wanted to make sure that I hit that point as well. So respect isn't about dominance. It's about authenticity, trust, and mutual understanding. So one of the things I really want you to understand or take with you today, I should put it that way, is consider that when you're struggling with respect, it could also be about you're struggling with understanding what is important to you and how do you want to show up. So one of the key things that I work with within the Leadership Edge program with the women that I work with is on getting very clear on what are your core values. And your core values, they actually lead to all of the actions and decisions that you take. So if you're finding yourself really struggling also within your leadership perspective, as well as in garnering that respect, look at whether or not you are acting from the core values that you desire, or the unknown core values that are getting in your way. What do I mean by that? So if you are valuing transparency, and you talk about that, right? I value transparency. So here's what's at play at the moment. You speak about it, you state that you're transparency. You might also even go say, I value transparency, and this is what it means to me and why this is important. Now you've laid it out. Your actions need to back that up. So in other words, when there's a situation that comes up and it calls for transparency, you are also transparent. You don't then go, ooh, I don't look really great in this situation, so let's hide this one right now. No, because you're no longer living and leading according to that value. Now, what about those hidden values? A hidden value is, for example, and I had this happen with one of my clients, is she had stepped into her CEO role, or CFO role, I should say. So her first executive role was working a lot and really wanted to empower her team. So she was communicating in the way of, I want my team to be autonomous. I want them to be empowered to take action. And yet her actions on her end meant led to her wanting to double check every single piece of work that they did. So if there was reports being generated, she wanted to see the reports before they would be even distributed. She wanted to make sure that the processes and the steps, each of those steps were put through her for her approval. So through her actions, what she was doing was actually telling her team that she didn't trust them and that she was wanting to have control over every aspect of the team, and as well as what she was responsible for. When we dug into this, the underlying value that was driving all of these actions on her part was this driving need for safety. So for her, a core value was to be safe. And for her, in order to ensure that she was safe, what her unconscious mind and her mind did, the actions that were taken, was to actually take on 100% or as much as possible as control as she possibly could. Now, that's what I mean when we're talking about living and leading according to your values. You sometimes aren't aware of the value that's actually driving your actions and decisions. And that can lead to that conflict where you're not getting the respect either that you want or desire. Okay, I think that we have covered quite a lot in the last 20 minutes. I would really love to hear any of your questions that you've got. So, again, there's some common mistakes that are happening that you might be emulating traditional or masculine leadership styles, overcompensating with assertiveness. You're not setting clear value or clear boundaries or maintaining those clear boundaries. You're diminishing your accomplishments and you're not taking credit for your work, and you stay silent in situations where you speak up and don't voice your thoughts. So when you're doing that, you are not commanding the respect that you desire, or also, I would dare to say, need, in terms of being a leader in your organization and in your role. Now, common ways that leaders are being disrespected, and especially women leaders. This is when they are being spoken over or interrupted during meetings. Their decisions and ideas are being second guessed. They're not acknowledged or given credit for their contributions or successes. They face gendered criticism or feedback that focuses on personal attributes rather than professional abilities. And fifth, they are expected to take on more of the office housework or nurturing roles within the company or within the team. And if you are looking for 5 ways, so I'm just summarizing all of this up, 5 ways that show that you're being respected as a leader. Your team is actively seeking your guidance and advice on various matters. Your teams trust your decisions, and they are taking your suggestions very seriously. They trust your decision. Let's repeat that. They trust your decision and are willing to follow your lead. Your colleagues, your team members, and your leaders also speak highly of you when you're not there. Fourth one, your ideas and suggestions are given serious consideration and implemented. And most likely the most important one is you're being invited to participate in crucial decision-making processes. So, any questions, please drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you as well. And as always, if you're looking to get some extra support, are you ready to choose and to redefine your leadership and command the respect that you deserve, then please DM me Define, and we can start having a conversation, because you're not alone in this. I've helped over 60 plus women leaders throughout my programs and courses in order to achieve the success as well as the respect and the sustainable work life strategies that they like, or integration that they like to achieve for themselves. So I look forward to hearing from you. Again, DM me Define if you want more information. And if you want access to the replay of the masterclass, then also DM me or comment below replay, and I'll make sure that you get that link as well. I wish you a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week.